All right, you good to go?
Yeah, should I like spin into the frame or something?
Yeah, do it. I'll slide
Okay,
in
here
from
we
the
go.
side. Hello, everybody. Welcome,
Your turn.
Javan with 1550 and Donately.
Right.
Today, we're sitting down with Marcus Russell Price. Marcus and I worked together in the nonprofit world. Gosh, I was 10, 15 years ago at this point. He's gone on to do some amazing photography work, some awesome directing work. Marcus, welcome. Thanks for hanging out.
Yeah, glad to be here. It's man, I was thinking about when we were doing like the Invisible Children live stream, how like difficult that tech was to work with. And
Yeah,
this is a matter of just opening up a URL. How about it?
yeah. Let's see how it holds up. I also remember ordering pizzas on a live stream and like my mind was blown that we were talking to so many people that we could just ask for pizza and pizza showed up like 30 minutes later. That was
That
one of
was
my
like
like most that was my favorite.
that was peak that I could just we could just say things out loud and it would appear.
Yeah, it was nice. Yeah.
We're
You could
getting
also
close again
torture.
with AI, but back then it's just you just need to have a lot of people watching your every move and them
Yeah.
responding accordingly.
Yeah, which is tricky to do, right? I don't know that I've ever succeeded at making mobs deliver pizza to me again. So that
No,
might have peaked in my skill set there.
that was a one and done.
Also, I didn't. This is on my shelf.
Whoa, I did that
Old school.
a long time ago.
It's good stuff. I found it going through my garage, and I was like, you know what? That needs a place in my office. So I dug it
Cheers,
up.
thanks.
Well, yeah, I'd love to let you give your story a little bit. We started in the nonprofit world. I love the photography work you're doing. I love the circle you're in now. Just a beautiful storytelling. So if you want to tell everybody kind of where you were, where you're at now, and we'll get into it.
Yeah, well, I guess I moved to San Diego in 2006, which is when that must have been when we met, right? 2000
Mm-hmm.
or
Somewhere in there.
2007, something like that. I was playing music for a long time. That's what I wanted to do, but then I met Kenny and Brandon from Invisible Children, and then they convinced me to throw that plan in the ditch and
Yeah.
move out to San Diego. So I did, and I came out without much of a plan other than like here's an organization that really grabbed my attention, like in terms of like their efforts and what they were trying to pull off, and like their ability to mobilize the youth with for sort of I guess like their efforts inspired a lot of people, myself included. And so I said, hell yeah, I'll move to San Diego. Did that, and then not long after joined the graphics team, which is when you and I started working side by side. Left Invisible Children 2010 to join another band. I moved to New York, and then just sort of been bopping back and forth between coasts since then. You're right. I started shooting photography for comedy in 2013. I met one comedian, this guy Hannibal Burris, who's everyone knows is one of the most hilarious humans alive. I saw we had a mutual friend on Facebook, so I stalked him on Facebook and I said, "Hey, introduced me to Hannibal because I had just bought a camera and I wanted to use it." And so I linked up with Hannibal and I said, I got to take photos. I also do graphic design. So I started doing all of his merchandise and posters and videos and photos. And it's just sort of one of these positions I just fell into, which I think has been a theme in my life. It's just me saying like I'll do that without much qualification. Like even at one point I became like one of like the senior designers at Invisible Children with really no qualifications other than I wanted to do it and I had like an
Skill.
earnest effort to become as good as best at it as I could.
Yeah, but you were talented, man. I mean, you could see that from day one. So like, it's not surprising. Kind of pop from spot to spot and just use that creative skill set, dude. That's right.
Yeah, so now and I've been in comedy really since 2013, not primarily, but or rather not exclusively, but primarily in comedy. Yeah, it started as doing photography and then a bit of like videography and documentary into producing and now into directing. So it's just snowballed. I think part of it was right place at the right time, but also like I said, the sort of like I always tell people is just volunteer yourself for things, and that's I've gotten as far as I have just by sort of sticking my foot in the door and saying like, I'll do that. Um,
Yeah.
it's been fun.
Nice, man. Well, we'll get back to the nonprofit side of thing in a little bit here. I want to touch on the idea of kind of content creation, the idea of producing, directing, photography, graphic design, like all those things are in the world of um, production. And I want to kind of think a little bit about that, or at least talk to organizations about what your creative process is a little bit. Because what I see from the outside is almost everything you're touching has talent tied to it, right? And I want to unpack kind of what your process is a little bit, and maybe see if we can dig some advice for organizations out of what it is you do, kind of where you find inspiration, what your process is. So let's jump in, maybe just in even how it started, right? Like you feel like you just kind of get pulled to it with Invisible Children and with the comedy that, what is it once you're there? Like, what are you looking for when you start to craft content, when you start to build things, right? That kind of make stuff stand out.
Um, it's been a funny journey. It's meeting people like you. Actually, I mean, when you and I started working together, you gave me a really like long leash and said just kind of go for it. And I think it was people like you who kind of gave me permission, or uh, I think it's like one of these things where you sometimes you need someone to crack the door for you. And I
Mm.
think like that you're one of the first people that really did that for me, where it just kind of like to see what's behind it, just you know tug at those interests, tug at those curiosities. And so I guess that's where it began for me. But then when you start linking up with other people, you start hearing what they're interested in, like what their story is, what moves them, like what sort of like their brand is, so to speak. And so it allows you to sort of take on other people's personas, or like like borrow their inspirations and their ideas and sort of like mash them with your own, or at least in my case, mash them with my own sort of ideas and creative proclivities.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been fun. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's frustrating. It's when you work with a lot of brands or organizations. Sometimes you win the lottery and you have like a really cool client that believes in you creatively and let you do what you want to do, and they trust that they hired you for a reason because you because I have
Yeah.
ideas, because you have ideas. But a lot of times it's our job to sort of actualize other people's bad ideas, and that's sort of as a professional
Yeah.
trying to figure out the balance of how to pull that off, or how to sort of uh, weed those clients out, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's a dance every day, really.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one thing I remember about you early on was it was better to just let you run, right? Like to try to mind mend and kind of throw ideas out there for where I want something to go versus where I just knew you could take it. I'm just particularly thinking of random projects, but one that just popped into my head is Hunger Free. I don't know if you remember working on that one, but it was just kind of like, hey, go work on that a bit and come back. And the stuff that you were coming up with, uh, there was no guidance to it. It wasn't what I was looking for. It wasn't where I wanted to take it, but it was better, right? So I think in a creative context, it's challenging because you get ideas. And I think this is the most challenging part about client work too, is they have a vision, but they don't have a way to do it. They have to lean on you as a photographer or designer, but you can't see inside of somebody else's head, right? And I think that becomes the hardest part, is to train up and execute um, creative vision. But the person who has that vision kind of has to be the person who can get in the weeds and do it. And I know for me, I'm pretty tactical in the way I do it. Like there's an inspiration phase, and then there's a design phase, and then there's a polishing, and there's a lot of ways that my brain goes through it in a very logical way. And I feel like oftentimes that's a hard thing to put on somebody. So our best designers are people like you, where it's like, look, there's the client, there's the need. You go find your own inspiration. You go find your own journey. Just at the end of it, we have to come back with, whether it's a branding project or a web project, we got to come back with the end product. But for me to kind of nurture people through that, that's pretty tricky. And I always felt like when we were working together, it was best just like give him the baseline of where he needs to go, and then let's see what comes back. And
Yeah,
I
I
don't know if
kind of
there
wish
is process. I'm curious if that, do you feel like there's process in there? Or is that kind of what you like? Is just like sitting in the weeds of like, I have no idea where I'm going to go with it, but it's going to be cool when I'm done.
it makes me like and like talking to you now, because it's been so long since we've really spoken.
Yeah.
Like I'm remembering sort of like a lot of your process and how you work, and it makes me wish I would have spent more time with you, because you're way more structured and organized than I could ever hope to be.
Don't
And
hope
I
for
feel
that.
like in a lot of ways I still am sort of just hanging out in the weeds, and like just somehow I always get the ball across the finish line, but it's I wish I would have picked up some more of those like structural and like healthy work um, you get
Habits and structures. I don't know.
it.
I think that that's the part of it though. Like think of like actors and musicians. Like I think part of it is that there is no process, right? Like you have to be able to follow whatever the inspiration is, right? And there's times when you get into that flow and you can feel that, but there's times when the structure kind of breaks that for you too, right? Especially things like budgets, where it's like, all right, I got 2 days. It's like, well, how do you put a timeline on trying to make something of craft, right? Like you just sometimes it goes quick and sometimes it takes a while, but in the business world, you kind of got to figure that out. And I think that kind of comes to a lot of the work that you're doing, right? I mean, you have a photo shoot, you only got so much time to capture somebody. You're going to direct a special. I'm sure Netflix doesn't just say, "Oh yeah, turn it in whenever you feel like it's good," right? Like there's got to be some boundaries to the creative work, right? So be curious when you think about some of that, right? Like how do you maybe operate in a space where you lack some of that process, but still land the plane, right? Get the product done, get the photo shoot done. What helps kind of land the
Yeah, well,
plane in those
it's
scenarios.
tough. I mean, starting as like a sort of like a junior designer, where when you're early in like the creative space, it kind of is your job just to actualize other people's ideas, right? And then as you move along and as you sort of develop a style or people begin to know you for your work, then you do begin to get a bit of a longer leash. You know what I mean? People start to trust you. At least this is how it's been for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now I am at a point where most of the people I work with, they know me for my work and they know what I'm capable of. So they do kind of just say, like, Marcus, just do it. Like I work a lot with Ronnie Chang is one of the comedians I work with the most, and I love working with Ronnie because he has such little input for me. I think he's a genius, and I would never tell him how to do his comedy. I think in a similar way, he just really gets a kick out of watching what I can kind of come up with, and so I love working with Ronnie because we both, I think, we have a mutual admiration for each other, and as a result, I think the things that we kind of are able to create together really stand out, and they're some of the pieces that I'm most proud of. Um, but I remember, like, right around the time I guess it must have been right around the time I left San Diego and moved to New York. I kind of had this sort of, I wouldn't call it an epiphany, but I kind of developed this like mantra or whatever you might call it, that if I wanted to take myself seriously as an artist, I needed to take seriously the things that inspired me. And
Mhm.
because to not do that, to sort of disavow that, would be doing a great disservice to myself and anyone who would want to work with me, right? You know what I mean? It's like, and I remember I moved to New York and I have business partner. I started a creative agency with a couple guys, um, and they're based out of Wilmington. And I remember a couple times we had Wilmington, Delaware. We had some conversations where it was like, oh, should I relocate to Wilmington from Delaware? And I was like, I think that would be a mistake. You know what I mean? Just being
Yeah.
in New York allows me to be around so many other creative peoples and so many like tastemakers and culture, and like, I'm minutes from so many different museums and exhibits, and it's like being here is what at least allows me to keep my teeth sharp and sort of have so much inspiration fresh in my brain. And so, like, that's just like, for the past 10 years, that's really been a big thing for me. It's just like this never ending quest for inspiration, whether it be going and visiting something or reading something or spending time watching a movie or buying a new camera, just having the tools that you're excited to use them. It's I don't know. I think it's what's what allowed me to stay relevant and sort of grow as a creative.
Yeah. I think that's huge. I envy that a lot. I'm close to LA. I could do some of that, but being in San Diego is not quite the hub for cultural expression. But
No, I love San Diego. There's so many different types of people there, and there is I mean, that's when I first started linking up with other creatives. It was in San
it's true.
Diego. It was
Yeah.
you. It was Brandon. It was all my friends who were playing music there. It's this guy Andre Power, who's gone on to become an incredible DJ and producer. Like, he and I started hanging out and changing ideas. San Diego was a total springboard for my creative career, so to speak. I love San Diego. I would never speak bad about it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Um, I think too when you talk about just being surrounded by inspiration, I think that's a good theme. I think a lot of people get into the nonprofit world like because they're inspired by it. That's what brought us into it. Invisible Children, right? Like you got one life to live. I didn't want to sell laptops and golf clubs and t-shirts. I wanted it to be something that meant something to the world, right? And I know we talked a lot about just living a life where you put your skills to something that mattered, right? And I thought that was really cool with that organization. I think that's what inspired us. I think people work for nonprofits because the mission is inspiring. I think the correlation that I want to draw here is that you being in New York or San Diego or a city that has a lot going on, there's a lot of content, there's a lot of inspiration, a lot of partnerships. And I see that in the work you do. I see that in the social media you put out, in the work you're doing. Um, and I think you would agree that it's a lot harder to capture those stories when it gets narrowed down to an organization or like their mission, right? And we're going to talk about Keo in a little bit and the trip you're taking. Um, but how do organizations wrestle with that, right? It's not easy for them to capture that content. It's not easy for them to get that inspiration. Oftentimes, when the mission and the work they're doing is so far away, I wonder if we could cover any. I don't know if it's tips or ideas, but really, how have you helped wrestle with invisible children and with Keo around capturing this content, capturing the inspiration, and like bringing that story to life, because it's not so easily readily available as like walking out your door, right? How do we do that better?
Well, I think it's like I mean, if there's someone like me and there's someone like you, there's chances are there's a lot other people out there that are similar to us in certain ways. And I think that with Invisible Children, what we found was if we're able to express or put out into the world that this is something that's important to us, and good chance if it's important to us, it's important to you and to other people like us. And I think that that's been a big part of what I learned from Invisible Children and Falling Whistles, and now working with Keo Project is it's if you're trying to like create content that reaches everybody that's like sort of like middle of the road that anyone can identify with. I mean, you'll do that and you'll succeed to a regard. You know what I mean? But if it's something that grab my attention, like I don't know, and cause me to stand up and say this is something I want to dedicate like my time to. I can't imagine that I'm the only one that would feel that way. You know what I mean? So it's a matter of
Yeah,
expressing, I think, our individual stories and how it's affected us individually. Um, that people, I mean, that's the whole thing is we're talking about stories here, and I fell in love with storytelling when I was super young, just watching cartoons and movies and listening to my grandfather. It's like stories. This what's his name? This documentary filmmaker, Tahir Shah. He said that stories are the currency or like the communal currency of humanity. You know what I mean? And it's what sort of allows like how would I say this? It motivates, right? I mean, stories motivate, whether it's to like tell someone, oh, you got to watch this movie, or
yeah,
like you got to do something about this. You know what I mean? Or you got to like, here's what's happening to me. Can you help it? The stories move people in a emotional, but also in a very physical sense. You know what I mean? So it's a matter
yeah,
of finding an effective way to tell the story of what's happening, but also how it's affected. Yeah, that's what we learned from Invisible Children, right? It's like there's lots
yeah,
of documentaries about things that are happening in different places in the world, but what made Invisible Children, the documentary, so effective was it was about Bobby, it was about Laren, it was about Jason, and how they experienced it and how they interfaced with it. You know what I mean? That's what made it relatable because
yeah,
they're people like us, right? And so they were moved and they were affected by it, and this is how they navigated through it. And now it's in our lab. What are we going to do about it? So I think
yeah.
that that's like the biggest part of or what sort of really resonates and continues to resonate with me.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to come back to that idea of the organization story. I love what you said about the story about the founders, but then it became kind of a choose your own adventure, and it became something that invited everybody else into like, where is this going to end? Like, what are you going to do to finish this story? And there were such good storytellers at laying that out and really drawing people like you and me into that. I think the first thing you said that I think is advice is really getting to a place where the story for organizations is something that people like you and I can fall in love with, right? So Invisible Children was that. Falling Whistles, like the concept of what a falling whistle was, that child soldiers were put out in the front to just find the enemy and blow a whistle and pretty much sacrifice themselves. Like that is such a crazy concept.
Mm.
And to tell that story, and we'll get to Keo's story, which I think is equally beautiful. This idea of empowering women and teaching photography and teaching art, like that was an amazing story, but it's not easy to find that. So I would say first, starting with organizations, having a story that people can be inspired and passionate about. And I love the idea of finding those people who are going to be equally um, passionate about their craft inside of that. Because you're right, man. In thinking back to the time of the Invisible Children, everybody there was passionate about what they were doing. I'm thinking of, yeah, Brandon and Ryan and just the entire creative team we had in OP. Like everybody was there, just loving the work that we were doing. Because of what it meant, right? So I love that idea of just really focusing in on and having a story that's inspiring enough that people like you and I can get there and live out what we need to do creatively based inside of that story.
Yeah, well, it's grabbing because it's not just. I mean, it's not just something that you can be watched and be moved by, but it's also like there's place for you here. You know what I mean? It's not
Yeah,
just like here's something that happened. Like think
yeah,
about it, feel it, but rather like here's something that happened. Like join us. Like there's room for you here. And so I think that that's like certainly what sort of like the first Invisible Children was the first example that I had ever seen. You know what I mean? And I think we continued that with other organizations I've worked with. And when I came and worked for you at 50 and 50, I feel like I remember almost everything we did was sort of leave. There was an emphasis on leaving space for others to participate, to involve themselves in. I think that's what we're also trying to do with Keo Project is leaving room for like this is something that we are trying to build, maintain, push forward, but also like we can't do it without you. So bring your ideas, bring your talent, bring your your inspiration,
bring your camera.
bring your
um,
camera.
let's talk about it. Tell everybody what Kia Project is and what you guys are up to.
Yeah, Kia Project is a organization that I only recently joined up with. It was founded by my friend Babita Patel, and she's a photographer, photojournalist, and she started this organization where the idea is teaching gender equality through photography. And that is what we do is we go to economically challenged areas, we bring a bunch of cameras, and we teach photography to a group of girls. And by doing this, the girls um, learn like leadership, and they build self-confidence in themselves. They are given creative outlets, and so that takes place during the first week. And then the second week, the girls take what they've learned and they teach it to a group of boys. So the boys are in a position to see the girls as leaders, to see them as equals. And they saw how much fun the girls had in the first week, right? And if they want to be involved, they have to listen. They have to behave. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah,
it's really a beautiful model that Babita created, and I just feel fortunate enough that they wanted me involved with it. So I take no credit in it. I just feel like I said, fortunate to be able to be a part of it. So last year we went to Nepal. I mean, Keo's done lots of trips to Ethiopia and India and the Bronx and all these different areas in the world. Nepal was only the first trip that I took with Keo Project, and it changed my life. You know, I worked it with Invisible Children for so long, and then I switched into comedy. Not that I don't find comedy gratifying, because I think comedy is really important
mm-hmm.
to the world, to humanity. It's comedians have found a way to sort of define the human experience and allow us to laugh about it. And I was managing Pete Davidson's Instagram account at one point, and he would get so many messages from people saying like, like you saved my life, or like what you do means so much to me. So
Yeah,
yes, I went from the nonprofit world to sort of, I guess you could say, Hollywood or entertainment, but I don't find that what I do in comedy is any less important, because I know there's been times in my life where I really needed to laugh. You know what I mean? And I
yeah,
think that comedy really does open something up in people, and is healing. And so going from sort of documenting comedy and then allowing the skills that I gained and being able to document well, and then being able to translate that back into sort of the humanitarian realm with Keo Project has been such. Like I said, I feel so lucky to be able to be a part of it, because I do feel like it's sort of life giving to me, and I feel like I do have something that I'm able to share. But it's just been it really has been uh, like an awakening in myself for the things that I feel like certain parts of me that I haven't seen since Invisible Children. But it's been great. Went to Nepal. We stayed there for 2 weeks. We taught the girls the first week, and then the second week, hands off, the girls taught the boys, and they did so well. And there was points where we're teaching these girls how to handle the cameras and how to use them, and work with them. And after each session, each workshop, the girls then come back and they show us the photos they took, and they have to talk about them and say what it means to them or why they made these certain decisions. And I saw a lot of girls who I found to be really shy or timid, and I was like, oh man, well they're going to have a lot of trouble when it's time for them
mm,
to teach the boys. But I'm telling you, every single one of them the second week when it was time for them to step up, every single one of them stepped up, and I was totally blown away. And I said to Vita, like, what you created here, it really does work, and it's a beautiful thing to say. So yeah, so now we're going to Guatemala. We're doing the same thing. We're leaving in 4 days. I'm going to go to Guatemala for 2 weeks and do the same thing.
Yeah,
Um,
nice. That'd be fun,
um,
man. Yeah, I love what you're talking about with the idea of both teaching a skill set, which I think is huge in other places, both for confidence and for building skills, but then to work in the idea of gender equality. I think it's hard to build a business model that can do that, right? I think organizations across the globe are trying to figure out how do we kind of inch forward and make progress on some of these things, but this is a 180 on that. Like this is going full speed into solving a gender issue, doing skills training. It's such an awesome model. And I agree too to what you said around comedy. I mean, I know for me, comedy specials are huge because they give me an opportunity to step out of what I deal with on a daily basis around the work that I take on. Right. So as an agency that's focused on social impact, the work that we do is typically pretty serious, right? Whether it's, environmental work with the UN, or it's local organizations dealing with separated families at the border, or it's child soldiering. Like this is all pretty heavy stuff, to which you don't get desensitized to necessarily. You kind of start to live in that space where the stuff you're designing is heavy, and you go to talk to your wife and it's like, dude, like is heavy, right? Like can we just talk about something a little, a
sure,
little
sure.
more uplifting, right? And for me, when I need to unwind, popping on Netflix and grabbing a comedy special, and I mean anything that can kind of take your mind back out of that. And like you said, there's an ability to not separate from the realities of the world, and that's where I think comedy does such a great job of like addressing societal issues and addressing things that are not necessarily uplifting, but to do it in an uplifting way, I think is phenomenal. And you look at the people that you are in the circle with in terms of who's doing that and what they're doing, and I think it's a huge service to the world. So kudos for finding a way to do that and really tell the stories of the people behind the scenes. I think the work that you do is awesome in that space.
Yeah, I'm always amazed by like almost all my friends are comedians now, which I find really lucky that that is the case, and I really do get to be friends with the funniest people in the world. But just like I said, I think that comics have they have like a muscle in their brain that I think that only they have. I don't know if it's something that you can develop. I think it's like either you have it or you don't. But just their ability to see, like you said, any corner of life and like give us permission to laugh about it, which is so freeing. And I'm going to give an example that's kind of dark, but my friend Drew Michael, he had a joke about a bit that he did about suicide, which is like a really, I think anyone can agree that's probably like a really difficult topic to talk about because it's something that probably affected everyone, and it's difficult, you know. And so he had this bit where he talked about suicide, and he said that this woman got upset at a show, and she goes like, "Do you think that that's funny?" He goes, "No, I think it's like really sad." But the fact is, people who get upset about these jokes aren't the ones that are suicidal. People who are suicidal love these jokes because it makes them feel less alone. It makes them feel like they're not crazy, that I'm not the only one that
Mm.
has these feelings and these thoughts. You know what I mean? And so it makes people feel like, oh, like there's more people that are like me. Like it's and so like I think that he's very talented. I think that there's so many other. I mean, every comic that I know, they're able to do that. They're able to find these difficult issues to talk about, and they do talk about them. They touch on them. They make people laugh, and it's you. It's such a talent, and it's such a difficult line to walk. And I'm always amazed by it. I feel I feel very fortunate to be involved with so many talented and creative people that, like I said, I find it no less important than my work I did with humanitarian organizations.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like while the rest of the world is kind of walking on eggshells and not sure how to enter conversations, which you see a lot, right? When I'm doing branding work for a larger corporation who's wanting to say, hey, we have a social mission, or hey, we're going to do either a give back campaign, or we want to get more recycled materials into the product line, or whatever they're doing. There's such a hesitation to jump into the environmental conversation, or any of the societal issues. And so where everybody else is kind of treading lightly and walking on eggshells, I think comedians can jump in and almost normalize some, any subject matter. And I think that can be refreshing, right? To not feel like you're just this victimized, person off in the corner, but that it's stuff that we can talk about and open up. And I feel like, again, when you're doing it with a smile and you're doing it with comedy, there's a way that people's guards can be let down. And I still, I don't want to make this political either in terms of what we're doing, but I just wanted I want that freedom, freedom of speech and freedom for people to be able to do that. And I think that's so important that comedy is still standing there and saying, hey, this is important for people. We need to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Um, well, I think it'd be valuable if I could help listeners find and attract people like you, Marcus. I think you're such a talented person. Like, what can organizations do? We talked about it a little bit earlier, right? Giving you a little bit of trust, a little bit of creative freedom. If I just asked you, what would an organization need to do to find somebody like you that just puts their blood, sweat, and tears into the mission, their mission? You got any ideas for people?
I can find me. You looking for me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hit me
Not
up.
you. Well,
It's funny.
literally you. We'll give them some contact info later if you're looking for it. But if it's you, if it's somebody like you, right? Like I think oftentimes, it's hard to work for nonprofits, right? And you know that, like, we both did it for a while, and we've found a way to keep social impact as a part of the work we're doing. I think you and I would die a little inside if we didn't have that, right? And I know you're a, a firm believer in purpose, right? And I think we said we've talked about it already. Like, you're finding that in the comedic work that you're doing, and in the just finding time to work with Keo. But there's something that has to be done by an organization to attract somebody like yourself, and that's what I'm trying to think of, right? Like, what do these different organizations that you work with do to build, I don't want to go all the way into brand culture really, but all those organizations had a good culture behind them. And I'm curious what organizations could do to just get on the radar of creative people like you that, again, what I see being important is your passion, your inspiration, and really putting that to good use. So how do people find somebody like you?
I mean, I think we live in a time where like there's so many creators. I mean, I don't know if it's just because we have so much better access to them with like Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. You know what I mean? But there's so many
Yeah.
people that are just grinding endlessly, creating with so much more. Like I don't know where they find the energy, and it's really impressive. And it's really, I find, we're talking about inspiration. I find it so inspiring because when we started Invisible Children, I think being around you guys was like the first group of creatives, that I had ever really been around. And it was like I felt like I, went through the wardrobe. I went through into this other world that I knew nothing about. And so I think that we are really fortunate that we do have sort of access to see the content that so many people are making these days. And I think that they make it because they love it. Right. And if you resonate with the content or like the art that someone makes, it's not hard to reach out to a person and say, hey, like, I like what you do. What do you think about this? What if we did this together? I had someone tell me once, like, I think maybe it was our friend Jedediah Jenkins. He said, like, if it wasn't him, forgive me, but basically that it was like, if you read a book and you liked it, tell the author. You know what I mean? It's like, I think like
Yeah.
movie stars in a position where they get written up and they go to like premieres and like they do these press junkets and everything. But I don't know that authors quite live in the same kind of world. But it's not hard to find the email address or the Instagram account of someone that you appreciate and say, hey, like, I dig what you do, and it's rare, like, even the position that I'm in to get those type of messages. And I see every single one of them and they mean so much to me. And it really is fuel in the tank. And so it allows me to keep going and to keep trying harder and to doing more. And so I think that it's not hard to find me. It's not hard to find people like me, or rather to get in touch with us. And it's certainly if you have a vision or you have a mission or you have a brand or an organization that's trying to accomplish something, it's just like we said, it's if you're able to have a mission that other people find inspiring, that other people resonate with, you're way ahead of the game already. You know what I mean? And then to find someone
Yeah.
that can contribute and to bring their skills and their vision to it, do it. You know what I mean? Hit me up. All the time I have younger comics say to me, oh, like, someday I'll be able to afford to work with you. I'm like, motherfucker, you can afford to work with me today. Let's go. Like, what's your idea? I just like that. I want to make cool stuff with cool people, and
Yeah.
it's, I mean, a lot of times it is a dollar amount, but more often than not, it's just like, what's the idea? Yeah, I want to do that. I just had a conversation with this incredible comedian Andy Haynes yesterday, and he was like, hey, like, what would it cost to get you to do this with me? And I'm like, man, like, let's just do it and see if we can get someone else to bring money to the table.
Mm. Yeah, I think the world of collaboration's grown a lot in the last few years. I mean, you think about musicians, like you look at musicians on Spotify now, I feel like half of the songs are collaboration with somebody else. I think the world of finding ways to find other creative people and collaborate has grown a lot. And like you said, just the proliferation of social media and places where you can put content, like a different world where you can put so much out there and work with people. So I love that idea. And I think breaking through even just the willingness to throw yourself out there and hit people up, right? Like to just hit you up to get on this podcast, to hit people up to just say, hey, we have a beautiful mission. Would you be willing to work with us? I think is probably a barrier for a lot of people, right? You see the gloss and the glimmer of, social profiles and success with people, and you maybe don't have the confidence to say, hey, we've got something that somebody like that would be interested in. So again, if they have the right brand and that right story, then they can jump into collaborating with people like you. And again, even the world of how you hire and work with creatives, right? Like it used to be so much more of a 9 to 5, workforce. But even now, so many of the people that we work with are in and out on given projects, or they're part-time, and all the digital tools that have grown businesses to be able to do that and bring people in and out and collaborate on particular campaigns and partnerships, like all, I think, really, really good advice for people to get creative and find people like you. So that's smart stuff. Um,
Yeah, dude.
let's jump into how people can follow you, find out more about you. Let's talk about what you're working on right now. Make sure everybody knows about kind of what's coming out in the world of Marcus, and then how they can
Oh
track
yeah.
you down and
Well,
follow
like I
your
said, I'm
work.
about to go to Guatemala with Keo. I'll be there for about 2 weeks. One thing I didn't mention about Keo that I really wanted to emphasize was like gender equality is the mission, and photography is just sort of the vehicle that gets us there. And what we do is, we every place we go, we partner with an organization that's on the ground somewhere, that's local, so that after we leave, basically we leave them with the cameras and we leave them with our curriculum, so that they're able to continue the program. 'Cause a lot of these places, like being a photographer, is not necessarily like an option or a sustainable goal, but the idea is giving these kids like the tools to be able to express themselves creatively, and to sort of exhibit their own ideas, and like I said, develop these leadership qualities and like the ability to work together. So that's like the goal. What we just, it could be anything, but what we've chosen is photography, because we're all photographers and that's what we're able
Sure.
to share with them. And so for Keo, I think it's a model that I think that can be reproduced in a lot of different ways. Like I said, for us, it's photography, but it's the idea, the concept of gender equality, or just the mission of bringing people together to work together, both creatively and with like a common goal in mind. Because everywhere we go, we also ask the organization or the school that we go to, like, what's something that we can also illustrate in these practices in this workshop. And so for Nepal, it was sustainability. So while we were teaching photography, we were also teaching like the importance of not dumping trash all over the ground, and like, you know what I mean, but rather cleaning up after yourself, and what happens if you're pouring these chemicals or these substances into like your water source. You know what I mean? Like, it's the idea is that there's a lot of different things that hand in hand go together, that add up to a whole. And so, like I said, it's a model that I think Babita and certainly myself, I hope that other people take and they try to replicate in other ways. For us, it just happens to be photography. But to answer
Love that.
your
Good
question,
fit.
what else I'm doing besides Chiropractic is
Yeah.
yeah, I've been directing. I directed 2 comedy specials this year that are going to be coming out. One's going to be coming out on Netflix June 11th for this comedian Keith Robinson, who's hilarious. Originally from Philadelphia, but he's been in New York for I don't know how many years now. But it's called Different Strokes. He's so funny. Keith had 2 strokes over the past few years, and as like, just like we were talking about earlier, for a lot of people that's a game changer. That could be a career ender. But for him, I think I say
Yeah.
like each stroke made him funnier, because he was able to take that and take his experience and make jokes out of it. And man, I've been a fan of Keith for years, but this special I think is the best thing he's ever done. I can't wait for everyone to see it.
That's awesome, and hope everybody has a chance to Jump on Netflix, check out that special. What date again?
June 11th.
June 11th. We ready. So hopefully by the time you're watching this, it's out there. Check out some of
Yeah, and I've
Marcus's
got other
work.
specials I've done. I did specials
Yeah.
for Phil Hanley, for Gavin Matz, for Nimesh Patel, Joelle Nicole Johnson. Working on one with Jessica Curson right now. So, like I said, this is my world that I live in, and I feel really excited that I get to share it with everyone else.
That's awesome. And what about social following? Where can they follow you?
I'm Marcus Russell Price on just about everything. I mean, Instagram's really the only thing I'm that active on, which I need to be more active on. We're talking about like content creation. It's sometimes it's hard to it's easy to do things for other people. Sometimes it's hard to do it for yourself.
Oh yeah. Don't even bother looking for me. I think I stopped posting social personally 5 years ago. I got one shot of my kid wearing headphones about 5 years ago, and I think that's when I tapped out. I was like, you know what? I got nothing to say here.
I'm
Everything
gonna
else can be
encourage you to
business.
post
I'm
more
going.
often. If you wouldn't mind doing the same for me, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah.
I've got hard drives that are just filled with images that no one will ever see unless someone tells me to do something with them. Like I'm literally they're coming out of my ears.
Yeah. See if one of them's my wedding footage. I had John film it. I lost it. I think maybe it's on a hard drive somewhere at Invisible Children. So if you find that one, let me know. I'd love to have it.
I'll hire some hackers to go after it for you.
uh, all right. Well, did we miss anything? Anything else you want to cover? Talk about?
Uh, no, I don't think so. Anything that you want to talk about? Anything cool coming up there you working on? Anything that you pushed out recently that I can go look at?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always balancing the world, balancing my creative time between 50 and Donately. Donately's always kind of rolling out some new stuff. Right now, we're working on kind of an overhaul of our campaigning ecosystem. So I think for most organizations, tech is scaled a lot. I don't think the fundraising solutions lack any of the tech options anymore, but I think the issue of donor engagement is still huge. So we're kind of making not a pivot, but a shift into organizing the platform to be able to deliver kind of quarterly campaigns and really doing some of that campaign work on behalf of organizations. So rather than doing client work where we are, running a one-off campaign for, a cancer organization or a, animal shelter, it's, hey, this is a campaign that can work effectively for a lot of different organizations. So we're going to shift that into the Donately ecosystem where we can do that on a quarterly basis and roll out campaigns, whether they're influencer campaigns, peer-to-peer campaigns, crowdfunding, but give organizations, the content and the rhythms to do donor engagement on a regular basis. So we're moving in that direction, which kind of blends the two worlds I'm in a little bit. So that'll be exciting. In terms of product work, we've been doing a lot with the UN, just wrapped up some stuff with National University. They just kind of did a big rebrand, and we put a lot of that work into market with National University. Going to do a rebrand of 50. That's probably the thing I'm most excited about. We're still time. We got all our stuff up for a long time, so we're starting to think through how do we kind of bring back some of the little bit of the punk rock roots and kind of the advocacy roots, but at the same time, kind of bring clarity to what we do, what we deliver. So that'll be fun. So
dope, man. We're looking forward to seeing it.
All that, dude. Give me another 6 months and come back to our site and see how it's looking.
All right.
Cool, man. Well, hey, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Everybody spent some time checking out Marcus, one of the most creative dudes I've ever worked with. So
thanks, everybody. Thanks, Javan.
All right, buddy. Talk soon.
Sayonara.
Cheers.